After spending 26 years on death row, Jesse Dean Hoffman Jr. was executed by nitrogen hypoxia in Louisiana, a method never before used in the state. But before we get to his final breath, we have to rewind to the beginning. Thanksgiving morning, November 28, 1996. That morning, a duck hunter made a horrifying discovery in St. Tammany Parish. As the early sun rose over the cold waters of the Middle Pearl River, he spotted something unusual near a makeshift dock. As he got closer, his worst fears were confirmed. Lying there, naked and lifeless, was the body of a young woman. She had been shot in the head, execution style. Later that day, the woman's husband identified the body. It was Mary Molly Elliot, a 28-year-old advertising executive. A woman with a promising career, a loving marriage, and her whole life ahead of her, suddenly gone. Her husband had reported her missing the night before when she never made it home from work. He had called friends, coworkers, and hospitals, desperately hoping for any sign. But now, the worst news imaginable had arrived. Mary was dead. The last confirmed sighting of Mary was the evening of November 27, 1996. She had left her office in downtown New Orleans just like she did every night. But on this night, someone had been watching. And that someone had a gun. That same night, several miles away in New Orleans East, a couple stumbled upon what looked like trash scattered across an empty lot. At first, it seemed like nothing. But then they noticed something strange: clothing, personal items, and 3 ATM receipts lying among the debris. They turned them over to the police. The receipts led investigators to a Regions Bank ATM in eastern New Orleans. When they pulled the surveillance footage, a chilling scene played out. There was Mary, standing at the ATM, withdrawing cash. Her face was filled with fear. Right next to her stood an African-American man wearing a valet jacket that read valet. It looked like a normal transaction, but it wasn't. This was a hostage situation, and the night was only getting started. Investigators turned to the Sharon parking garage, the place where Mary parked her car every day. The employees there wore jackets identical to the one seen in the ATM video, and it didn't take long for police to zero in on a suspect. One valet, Jesse Hoffman, 18 years old, had been on break at the exact time Mary was last seen. Police arrested Jesse and took him in for questioning. At first, he denied everything. He claimed he had left work, taken a bus, and gone to visit his girlfriend. But when detectives pressed him, his story started to change. Now, he said he had been forced into a car by 2 armed men. He claimed that when he got inside, he saw a white woman in the back seat with a towel over her head. According to Jesse, these men took them to an ATM, forced the woman to withdraw cash, and then drove to a remote area. He insisted that they threatened to kill him and his girlfriend if he didn't assault the woman. Later, his story changed again. This time, he said one of the kidnappers walked off with the woman while he stayed behind. He swore he had never heard gunshots and had no idea what had happened to her. But the evidence told a different story. Under pressure, Jesse finally broke. He confessed. He admitted that he kidnapped Mary at gunpoint from the Sharon parking garage, forcing her into her car. He made her drive to the Regions ATM, where she withdrew $200. But he didn't let her go. Instead, he forced her to drive even farther, taking her to a desolate area in St. Tammany Parish, where the nightmare would only get worse. Mary begged for her life, and Jesse told her he wouldn't hurt her as long as she cooperated. But it was a lie. Instead of letting her go, he sexually assaulted her in the back of her car, holding her at gunpoint the entire time. Even after kidnapping, robbing, and assaulting her, he wasn't finished. Still naked and terrified, Mary was forced to walk down a narrow dirt path surrounded by overgrown weeds and piles of trash. She reached a small dock at the edge of the Middle Pearl River. There, Jesse made her kneel, and then he shot her in the head, execution style. She was still alive for a few minutes after the gunshot, but she was left there alone to die in the cold November night. After killing Mary, Jesse attempted to erase all traces of the crime. He dumped her belongings, threw away the gun, wiped off any fingerprints. Then he returned to work, telling his supervisor that he had just taken an extended lunch break. That lunch lasted 2.5 hours, the same 2.5 hours during which Mary Elliot was kidnapped, raped, and murdered. Later, Jesse's girlfriend unknowingly sealed his fate. She told police that Jesse had taken her shopping that night, paying cash for multiple items he bought. With DNA evidence, ATM footage, and Jesse's confession, prosecutors had everything they needed to convict him. There was no doubt. There were no excuses. There was no way out. His lawyers tried to argue that the gun went off by accident in a struggle. But the jury didn't believe him. The execution-style gunshot told the truth. This was no accident. They even tried to argue that the encounter had been consensual. But the jury dismissed that argument as well. On September 11, 1998, Jesse Dean Hoffman Jr. was convicted of first-degree murder. Just 2 days later, the jury handed down its final decision, a unanimous sentence of death. For over 2 decades, Jesse sat on death row. He filed appeal after appeal, arguing that his jury was all white, that his traumatic childhood had shaped his actions, and that he didn't deserve to die. But every court rejected his pleas. Then in 2010, Louisiana stopped executing inmates. Not out of mercy, but because the state couldn't get its hands on the drugs required for lethal injection. For 26 years, Jesse waited, trapped in a limbo between life and death, unsure if his execution would ever come. But then in 2024, everything changed. That year, the state of Alabama introduced nitrogen hypoxia, a new way to carry out the death penalty. Nitrogen is an invisible, odorless gas making up 78% of the air we breathe. It's harmless when mixed with oxygen, but without it, a person loses consciousness within seconds and dies within minutes. The gas will flow for at least 15 minutes or 5 minutes after the inmate's heart flatlines. It is a silent, suffocating end. Now, Louisiana has a new method, and Jesse has an execution date. It was set for March 18, 2025. His legal team fought back. They argued that nitrogen hypoxia violated the Constitution's ban on cruel and unusual punishment. They also claimed it violated Jesse's religious beliefs as a practicing Buddhist, arguing that meditation and breathing were central to his faith. Further, they said the tight industrial mask used in the process would trigger his PTSD and severe claustrophobia, stemming from childhood abuse. As a child, Jesse had been locked in a pantry by his mother for hours. The fear of suffocation was rooted deep in his psyche. His final moments, they argued, would be psychological torture. His legal team suggested that other execution methods, such as a firing squad or an oral drug mixture, would be more humane than nitrogen suffocation. However, Louisiana law currently only allows 3 execution methods: nitrogen hypoxia, lethal injection, and electrocution. The appeal was rejected, and the execution remains scheduled. On March 18, 2025, Jesse Dean Hoffman Jr. became the first person in Louisiana executed in over 15 years. Before his execution, he didn't say a word. No final statement, no apology. He also turned down the option of a special last meal, choosing instead to face death without ceremony. Among the witnesses that day was Jesse's wife, Ella. She had married him while he was already behind bars, standing by him through years of confinement. To her, the system had failed Jesse long before it ever sentenced him to die. As a child, he was left without the safety or guidance every kid deserves. And when he needed help the most, no one showed up. And that silence pushed him down a path where surviving came first and everything else came second. But he didn't stay that person. Over time, he had changed. He grew into a man filled with love, wisdom, and redemption. And just when he became the version of himself he was always meant to be. The same system that failed him as a child failed him again. Ella said, the system didn't want to see the man he had become. It only cared about the 18-year-old who made a terrible choice. It chose vengeance over justice. At 6:12 p.m., Jesse was strapped down, the nitrogen began to flow, and the chamber was sealed. Witnesses say his head jerked. His hands twitched. Then he fell still. The gas flowed for 15 minutes. At 6:50 p.m., Jesse Dean Hoffman Jr. was pronounced dead. He was 46 years old. And with that, Louisiana carried out its first execution in more than 15 years. Its first using nitrogen hypoxia. But questions remain. Was justice served? Or did a broken boy grow into a healed man, only to be executed by a system that never gave him a real second chance? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real crime documentaries.